to do another brief test, and this is to see how your memory works during a period of learning. So I'm going to read a list of words, and I want you to try to remember them in order.
Hello and welcome to the BO2 Lounge. This is episode 61 on sodium bicarbonate and its performance enhancing effects. The research on sodium bicarbonate has, as an ergogenic aid, has a long history, beginning in the 1930s with studies like those conducted by Denning and colleagues at Harvard University. Their early work indicated that pre-exercise ingestion of sodium bicarbonate could improve performance by inducing a state of alkalosis, setting the stage for decades of further research. By the late 1970s, studies such as those by Jones et al. Began to establish a more systematic understanding of how sodium bicarbonate could enhance exercise performance. In their 1977 study, Jones and colleagues demonstrated that sodium bicarbonate significantly prolonged the time to exhaustion during high-intensity cycling compared to both a placebo and an acidosis condition. Now, this study was particularly influential because it introduced the now standard dosage of 0.3 grams per kilogram of sodium bicarbonate taken 3 hours before exercise. The 1980s saw a surge in international research interests, with numerous studies from various countries validating the ergogenic benefits of sodium bicarbonate across different types of high-intensity exercise, including cycling, running, swimming, and muscular endurance activities. Now, most of these studies were small, randomized, double-blinded crossover trials, which helped to solidify sodium bicarbonate's reputation as a reliable ergogenic aid. Obviously, these are the kind of gold standards of studies. Now, since then, the body of research on sodium bicarbonate has grown substantially, making it one of the most studied supplements for enhancing exercise performance. The consistent findings across multiple studies and various exercise modalities have reinforced its status as a significant tool for athletes and researchers alike. Nowadays, we even have rubs and gels containing sodium bicarbonate. So how does it work exactly? Now, people who've been around any kind of endurance sport for even less than a number of years, really, a couple of months, will probably have gone down the rabbit hole of what kind of legal, non-doping associated performance enhancing supplements are there that you can take, and sodium bicarbonate is usually at the top of the list, and it's something that you can find in your kitchen cabinet. It's not something that you have to go onto Amazon and order some niche supplement. It is literally as basic as the powder you're going to be using essentially for baking and cooking and so on and so forth. Now, what does it do? Does it really work? How does it work? And how effective really is it? Like, what sort of percentage gains can you see from ingesting it? And what sort of durations is it most beneficial for? Because that's also an important part. So let's start off with my own personal experience of using sodium bicarbonate. So the year is 2021. I've picked up cycling again / road cycling for the first time. It was more of a casual thing before, having an old steel frame bike, and then it was more of a mountain biker before that and a rugby player, but I've picked up cycling again. I'm riding, I'm getting better, but I'm like, how can I make this faster? The concept of having to ride or exercise for upwards of 10 hours a week, do these 4-hour bouts of exercise, do all these intervals, and it still take years to get to the point where you are aerobically sound. I mean, coming from a team sport, say for example rugby, you understand it's going to take years to get the motor skills and the reading the game and so on and so forth, but you don't necessarily go, I'm 3 years off being at the fitness level to compete at the top level necessarily. It's more the skill you associate it with. So the skill of riding the bike, arguably, yes, when it comes to racing, there is an element, but really you think, I can pick up riding a bike quickly. Surely I can get to a good standard, quickly if I focus on things. So you're looking at supplements. That's what I do. I have this ride where I'm, for the first time, going to go from about 60k up to 80 kilometers, ride to my parents on a long weekend on the Friday, stay there 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, ride home. So, perfect time for an experiment. I ride over there, no sodium bicarbonate. I get there, and I'm like, this is the perfect opportunity. So then, on the Saturday, I take 0.3 grams per kilogram of sodium bicarbonate. As we've mentioned before, being the gold standard of volume of sodium bicarbonate you would take per kilo of body weight. At this point, I'm probably 100 kilos, 189 centimeters, still in somewhat rugby form. I've come down from 106, but I'm still about 100 kilos, so 30 grams of sodium bicarbonate. I take it, it's disgusting, it's horrible. However, I then give it 3 hours, and then I spin the legs out on the indoor bike my parents have. And subjectively, I'm like, this is amazing. This like sort of thresholdy kind of effort / VO2e effort feels easier. It was purely subjective. I wasn't looking at numbers, didn't have power, nothing. It was just a feel in the legs. How does this feel? So from there, we progress to a day off, which is the Sunday. And then the Monday morning, I go, right, let's do this again. And what proceeds to happen is obviously there is still residual sodium bicarbonate in the system, and gastric distress sets in rather rapidly. Now, I don't know whether it is the residual concentration or it's a combination of maybe the stress put on the system from the initial bout or the fact that I'm on an empty stomach. Not sure. But I take the sodium bicarbonate, and within 10 minutes, my digestive system has been liquefied, and that persists for about 30 minutes. And then it gets to the point where it's a bit touch and go. As long as I don't get out of the saddle, I ride home. I subjectively feel like it's helping. Don't know how much it's helping. As we're going to find out due to the sort of the bouts of exercise that it is most beneficial for. But that's my own experience. I did it technically the 2 times, never utilized it again because I deemed the exercise I was doing, the performance benefit / risk profile, like the performance to risk profile, was just simply not worth the effort. But maybe in researching this episode, I will be convinced otherwise. So let's get into the mechanism of how sodium bicarbonate works to improve athletic performance. So high intensity short-term exercises, especially those lasting from a few seconds to several minutes, relies heavily on an anaerobic energy system due to the rate of ATP hydrolysis sort of outpacing ATP resynthesis by the mitochondria. Now, 2 primary anaerobic systems come into play: the ATP phosphocreatine, ATP PCR also, now system and glycolysis. The contribution of these 2 systems to ATP production varies with factors like age, training, and most notably the level of exercise intensity. As intensity increases, the ATP phosphocreatine system becomes more and more dominant. Think of this, you'll get it from the fact that the name creatine, like weightlifting, for example, while lower intensity relies more on glycolysis. Now, low intensity still being, when in respects to like running or cycling, like threshold. It's still low intensity on this scale, but it's high intensity from a broader spectrum. Anyway, now this shift in energy system reliance also alters the metabolic byproducts, with short maximal efforts leading to a rapid PCR depletion and longer intense efforts resulting in significant lactate and hydrogen ion accumulation. Now, fatigue during high intensity exercise is closely linked to these metabolic changes. Now, muscle fatigue involves a temporary decline in the muscle's ability to generate force and power. Obviously temporary in the sense that you don't then perpetually, forever, and never able to do, say, 400 watts again. largely due to the accumulation of metabolites and ions. Now, specifically, hydrogen ion accumulation leads to muscle acidosis. This is where that concept of lactic acid came from. In reality, it's not. It's more lactate and the hydrogen ion as two separate things that are byproducts of, for example, glycolysis. And now this then inhibits key glycolytic enzymes, reduces CA2 sensitivity, and infers with cross-bridge cycling, all of which contribute to a decrease in muscle performance, essentially just the contractibility and the force which you can contract with, and so on and so forth. Repeatability all goes down. Now, additionally, intense exercise alters ion gradients across muscle cell membranes, which can impair muscle excitability and further contribute to fatigue. Sorry, I also realized I referred to Ca2 or CO2 plus, which is just calcium ions, and they are responsible for signaling in the body, essentially. I think I might have mentioned them in one of my strength training episodes, but essentially part of the muscle signaling pathways, and the sensitivity goes down means the response essentially of the muscles going down. Now, sodium bicarbonate supplementation is thought to counteract some of these fatigue-inducing processes by increasing extracellular buffering capacity, now leading to metabolic alcolysis or alkosis, or however, but the alkalinity, the more alkalinity of the body. Now, this alkosis enhances the transmembrane hydrogen ion gradient, and now promoting hydrogen ions and lactate flux from muscle cells during exercise. By reducing the accumulation of hydrogen ions within muscles, sodium bicarbonate helps to maintain a more favorable intracellular pH, supporting continued glycolytic activity and generally delaying fatigue. Now, this buffering effect also appears to stabilize ion gradients across muscle membranes, presenting excitability and force production. Now, generally, this is the general consensus of what is happening with sodium bicarbonate, is that it is just adding to sort of this fatigue resistance of the muscle and promoting this environment that delays or buffers against general markers of fatigue, like reduced contractibility or contractile force, and reduced or an increase in pH, or a reduction in pH. The increase in acidity by a very small amount we're talking here, but the increase in acidity essentially. Our research has shown that sodium bicarbonate supplementation is particularly effective for exercise that is highly reliant on glycolysis, such as activities that last from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, where significant acidosis occurs. The benefits are less pronounced for very short or very long durations, where acidosis is less of a limiting factor. Think a 100-meter final, where it is essentially just how you're just burning through this very small store of energy around the muscle. And so there's never a buffering point, essentially. And then the same for like a 3-hour endurance ride. Arguably, you could say this 5 minutes could push out probably a bit, but say you're out for 5 hours, you're never at a point where you're like lactate is seeping in and you've really got a burn in the leg, essentially, versus compare the fatigue you get from 5 hours of riding versus 3 or 5 or 10 minutes at like threshold, for example. That's the difference, and that's where this sodium bicarbonate supplementation is supposed to improve performance. So there are then a long list of effects on sports performance that we can go through. Then the effects of sodium bicarbonate on performance do vary depending on the duration and the type of exercise that is being performed. So let's start with single bout running and cycling. So short duration, we're talking less than 30 seconds. Studies suggest that sodium bicarbonate does not significantly enhance performance in single bout high intensity exercise like 30-second Wingate tests, which is just all out. Meta-analysis show minimal differences between placebo and sodium bicarbonate in mean or peak power outputs, indicating that the ergogenic effect is negligible essentially. So if you're doing a sprint, it doesn't really matter. Now, moderate duration, talking 30 seconds to 12 minutes, sodium bicarbonate shows more consistent ergogenic effects for high intensity exercise lasting between 30 seconds and 12 minutes. Now, studies report significant performance improvements in tasks like the 800 meters, and 4K cycling time trials. Now, an example, sodium bicarbonate reduces the time to complete an 800 meter run by an average of 2.9 seconds. Now that, obviously, that number is based on the study, and it doesn't mean that if, Ingrid, I don't know, 800 meter runner, but anyway, an 800 meter runner is going to do it at the elite level by that sort of margin. But it's just saying, look, I'd rather if there was a percentage, but still, I don't know. Anyway, it shows that it improves performance. And the findings just generally suggest that sodium bicarbonate is particularly beneficial when exercise duration is long enough to induce substantial metabolic acidosis. Now, anything over 12 minutes, the benefits of sodium bicarbonate on longer duration, lower intensity tasks are more inconsistent. Some studies indicate that sodium bicarbonate does not significantly improve performance in prolonged exercise, such as 60-minute cycling time trials. However, if the exercise includes high-intensity sprints, for example, a final all-out sprint, sodium bicarbonate might still offer some ergogenic benefits, but essentially the longer the duration is, it's like a road race or even a crit, clearly. It's less beneficial, although there's some evidence to suggest that maybe that buffering could help improve the final sprint, for example. Now, repeat bout. So, if you've got short recoveries in your intervals, sodium bicarbonate seems to be more effective in repeat bout exercise, particularly when the intervals have short rest. They consider short rest to be between 3 and 6 minutes. So we're not even talking Tabata style work. We're talking, it could be 6 minute sort of thresholdy VO2e middle ground efforts. And it's just linked again to that fatigue resistance across the bouts, because obviously maybe the 1 minute effort isn't enough to cause acidosis, but if you think like when you do your 40-20s, the first effort, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth feel all right, but then once you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, it's excruciating, because essentially the acidosis has had time to build up, essentially. Now, longer recovery intervals, the effects are less pronounced with these rest periods. Now, this is where you're talking 15-30 minutes between bouts, generally do not show significant benefits, likely because the recovery time allows for sufficient metabolic clearance and reduce the need for the bicarbonate buffering effect. So just think, is there going to be lactate present in great enough amounts that acidosis of the muscle is becoming an issue, or is it not? And that's where the performance benefits will be found by sodium bicarbonate. If you carry it across to rowing and swimming, single bout rowing tasks, particularly the 2,000 meters, where approximately 30% of the energy is derived anaerobically. A meta-analysis suggested that sodium bicarbonate can improve rowing performance by around 1.4%. Which obviously is very crucial in a competitive setting. Swimming, the effects are mixed. While some studies report improved performance in longer distances, such as the 200 meter freestyle, others do not find significant benefits. Now, repeat bout, it again comes back to there's promise, especially when rest intervals between sprints are short, for example, 2 minutes or less. In protocols like the 5x10 or 5x100 yard, don't ask me why yards, but 5x100 yard swim, sodium bicarbonate improved performance in the latter sprints by approximately 2%. Where the rest intervals are longer, the benefits are less apparent. So generally, there's the clarity. It does work, or is thought to work. However, the effective window is kind of that, like, let's say 2 to 15 minutes, or where there is repeat efforts, which in an event, I suppose really it's less common. Obviously, like a criterium in cycling, you've got these on-off periods where maybe it's particularly beneficial, but maybe the race duration is too long for it to really take an effect. It just gets overwhelmed essentially by the amount of buffering it would need to do, or the benefit would be in the early part of the race, and then by the end you're past that threshold anyway. Really, in an endurance setting, it seems something like a 5 to 10k, depending how fast you are. Really, a 5k, I suppose, for a lot of people, in a way, like 20-25 minutes could be beneficial, but we're still on the latter end of things, really. So what about dosage, which we have discussed a little bit, but let's go into it a little bit more as to what sort of windows we've got for dosage. Now, for dosage, recent studies investigating sodium bicarbonate, or maybe not recent anymore, to be honest, have generally administered the compound in capsules to maintain the double-blinded study designs. Essentially, just so the administrator doesn't know, / the person doing the study doesn't know, and also the participant doesn't know who's getting what, because it's just a capsule, rather than someone taking a powder that there would be a clear taste to, or an obvious powder in their drink. You can just have a capsule full of flour or some inert agent. Now, early research often used a powder form mixed with water or other liquids, but the bitter and salty taste made it challenging to disguise, and the sodium bicarbonate potentially compromising the blinding process. So as I just said, it literally is just hard to blind it. But the capsules also present somewhat of they do present limitations, such as requiring ingestion of a large number to reach the ergogenic dose. I mean, if you think myself, 30 grams of sodium bicarbonate is a lot of powder. So these are either big capsules or there is a lot of capsules. And now, interpreting the study findings, it's important to consider that the form of sodium bicarbonate used, as it may impact the results and the participant experiences. I don't know if it affects the ingestion rate or so on and so forth, but anyway, that was what was kind of stated on one of the papers I looked at was, this. But the most commonly researched dose of sodium bicarbonate is this 0.3 grams per kilogram, which is consistently shown ergogenic effects in various studies. Research suggests that doses are as low as 0.1 are not effective, with some studies indicating that 0.2 can be ergogenic, though 3 remains the optimal balance between efficacy and the side effects, which we'll get onto, which I've already mentioned in the introduction, but we'll get onto them. Higher doses such as 0.4 and 0.5 have also been found to improve in performance, but are associated with more significant side effects. And the evidence indicates that while 0.2 may be sufficient for some, 0.3 is the most reliable dose for enhancing performance overall, and is the one essentially you go with if you're doing this. Now, the timing of sodium bicarbonate ingestion is crucial for maximizing the effects. Now, most studies have standardized ingestion times between 60 and 180 minutes before the exercise bout. However, due to the individual variability in the time it takes for plasma bicarbonate levels to peak, so in the blood. Some recent studies have individualized timing based on each participant's response, and this approach generally shows greater ergogenic effects, although it is less practical for most athletes who lack access to necessary equipment for measuring plasma bicarbonate levels. Well, it's a bit rogue being at home there trying to figure out how long after ingestion your plasma levels peak so that you can do it for your event. But, 60 to 180 minute window with individual experimentation is about the right time. I suppose it becomes a bit subjective, that's the thing at that point, so you could stick it bang in the middle and hope for the best, but yeah, that's kind of where it is. Multi-day supplementation protocols have also been explored as an alternative to single-dose ingestion. And these protocols, which often involve daily ingestion of sodium bicarbonate for several days leading up to competition, aim to avoid the side effects associated with the acute one-off ingestion. Now, these studies suggest that higher daily dosages of 0.4 to 0.5 over several days may be required to elicit ergogenic effects, although recent research has indicated that even lower doses over a longer period may be effective. While these protocols can be beneficial, particularly for athletes with events on consecutive days, they also present challenges such as the need for large capsules ingestion over multiple days, which could impact daily energy intake and performance. And you know what? I think the go-to is the 0.3 grams per kilogram, 60 to 180 minutes, have a play around. Don't do it for the first time on your event day. Don't do it for the first time when you're away from home like I did. Just do it in a moderately controlled environment and just see how the performance. Something I suppose you experiment with over the winter. I suppose something you could just mess about with. But yeah, the multi-day thing. I mean, maybe my instance of a reaction to it over the multiple days was just either poor scale etiquette and I took too much the second time, or the empty stomach malarkey. I don't know. But it was definitely present, and definitely wasn't present on the first iteration of me utilizing sodium bicarbonate. And it's partially one of the reasons I've never bothered again. Maybe I'll experiment this winter and see what happens. But for the time being, it's so disgusting. It's not happening again. So the side effects, as already discussed, gastric distress, but it can lead to various side effects, particularly like the discomfort and distress of the gastrointestinal system, which is significant concern for athletes who obviously don't want to poo themselves out on course. Now, these side effects, such as bloating, nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain, are primarily due to the build-up of CO2 in the gut. Now, the severity and incidence of these effects increases linearly with the dose of sodium bicarbonate consumed. Now, this of which can negatively impact athletic performance, as you can imagine. Now, long-term use at common doses such as 0.3 grams per kilogram may contribute to excessive habitual sodium intake, potentially exceeding recommended dietary limits. The long-term effects on kidney function, however, remain unclear and require further investigation. Now, I don't imagine anyone's taking this like twice a week for their their interval sessions. I wouldn't say this is what it's for. As much as that was my long-term aim as a young cyclist, it really is a key event day supplement. Obviously, things with like crit racing and circuit or track racing, where you can have a lot of events, I think it's really reserved for big key events, essentially. Now, research has demonstrated that these gastrointestinal side effects can sometimes negate the performance-enhancing benefits. Obviously, I mean, if your bowels are falling out of you, then you're not really going to do very well. In the 1995 study by Bird et al., two participants who experienced stomachache and diarrhea did not see an improvement in their running performance, funnily enough, suggesting that the side effects essentially overshadowed any benefits. Now, similar findings were reported in various other studies where significant performance improvements were only observed after excluding participants who suffered from gastrointestinal discomfort. While not all studies have shown strong impacts or side effects on performance, particularly when symptoms are mild, the inconsistency in reporting side effects across studies makes it difficult. It's essentially one of these classics of, the study is telling you not what to do, just the fact that, what not to do. And that is that try it out. Don't try it out the day before an event. See what happens. And if you don't get any gut distress, great. If you do, probably don't do it again. Now, to minimize the side effects, various strategies have been proposed. One approach is adjusting the timing of sodium bicarbonate ingestion, with studies indicating that taking it 180 minutes before exercise can reduce the gastrointestinal discomfort, sort of getting it out of the way almost, or under a lower stress scenario. Another strategy involves consuming sodium bicarbonate with high carbohydrate meal, which has been shown to lower the incidence of side effects while still inducing alkalosis. Anyway, just the alkalinity of the system. Additionally, reducing the dose to 0.2 grams per kilogram may lessen the severity of the side effects, though could also reduce the performance benefits. Now, research has sort of spoken about using capsules. Enteric, I think they are, enteric coated capsules which bypass the stomach and might further minimize the side effects. Essentially, that's where some of these other products seem to be coming into. I think you've got some gels and tablets, and although gels I don't think are bypassing the stomach, but maybe they've got some proprietary blend, as everyone has. That are preventing it. But you've got things like Ampumen, I believe they're called, or whatever they've called now, where you had that muscle rub essentially, that were proposing, that it has the same effects and bypasses the gut and so on and so forth. Personally, have I ever used it? No. Would I use it? I have considered it, but still, have I used it? No, it just never. As my understanding of training grew and the long-term trajectory of training, these kind of niche small supplements faded out, and the training modality and so on became more of my concern. And yes, maybe they will filter back in, but probably at the point where I'm specifically targeting a couple of events that I know I can do well at and I need to, or say you had like a national event, right? Then you'd go to that, you're focusing on that, you're building into that, you take a bunch of supplements and maybe like beta-alanine, or you need to load it, there's a loading phase up into that event, and there maybe is the time where you practice with some sodium bicarbonate. But again, as I became more aware of its effects over the long term, then that it may not be as performance enhancing on a north of 1 hour event, I was less inclined to experiment with it, and it became a bit more on the back burner. But nonetheless, it is reported to work. Now, what about interactions with other supplements? Because things like caffeine and nitrates are reported to cancel each other out. Are there any other? I did think, I was like, are there any supplements that you take it in conjunction with and it writes you off? So there's got a little bit on that, and yeah, let's just take a look at that. So of course, athletes in general use multiple supplements, to maximize performance gains, and this raises important considerations for interpreting research findings, since most studies have focused on isolated effects of ergogenic supplements. However, there is a growing interest in whether combining supplements can provide synergistic ergogenic effects or if they can counteract each other. Notably, combinations of sodium bicarbonate with other popular ergogenic aids such as beta-alanine, as I've already mentioned, caffeine, creatine, and nitrates have been explored to determine their combined effects on performance. Now, one of the most studied supplements combination is sodium bicarbonate with beta-alanine. Beta-alanine is known to increase muscle carnosine content, enhancing the muscle's buffering capacity over time. Given that beta-alanine boosts intracellular pH buffering and sodium bicarbonate enhances extracellular pH buffering, combining the two could potentially reduce the additive effects. Now, research supports this idea with some studies showing improved performance in high-intensity cycling, swimming, and rowing when both supplements are used together compared to using each supplement on its own. Meta-analysis further confirmed the co-supplementation with beta-alanine and sodium bicarbonate offers greater ergogenic benefits than beta-alanine alone, suggesting that its combination may be particularly effective in boosting exercise performance. And you've got caffeine, another well-established ergogenic aid, has been studied in combination with sodium bicarbonate due to their different mechanisms of action. Caffeine benefits are typically attributed to its ability to reduce fatigue and the perception of effort, perceived exertion basically, while sodium bicarbonate works by buffering pH levels in the blood. Although combining these supplements theoretically should enhance performance, a lot of studies have not found significant additive effects. One of the key challenges is the high incidence of side effects associated with sodium bicarbonate supplementation, which may, I think also caffeine in beta-alanine is something you kind of supplement over time, whereas caffeine obviously being acute, like sodium bicarbonate, I think there's probably an element of you need to do a similar sort of like 3 milligrams per kilogram, which can also itself induce a bit of gastric discomfort. So maybe compounding the two is too much for the intestinal tract and you just get a mess at the other end. Now, creatine, again, like beta-alanine, is something you supplement over time. A popular supplement for improving strength and power is also studied in combination. Now, early research indicates that the combination may offer additive effects, which studies reporting improved performance in activities like taekwondo, swimming, and repeated sprint tests when both supplements are used together. Combining creatine and sodium bicarbonate has been shown to reduce swim times and increase peak power during repeated sprints, suggesting that there is some kind of, the duo could be particularly beneficial for athletes involved in high intensity intermittent sports. It could be rugby, for example. Although the research is still limited, the combination, they're in isolation. All of these men at work. I'd say anything that's gonna, these long term like beta-alanine and creatine, you probably don't have to worry about as much. Whereas caffeine, especially if you're already someone who that can get you kind of in your stomach kind of churning over a bit, then combining the two, probably not a good idea. But one of note is the combination of sodium bicarbonate and nitrate, so like when you're doing these beet shots, may be counterproductive due to their opposing mechanisms. Sodium bicarbonate creates an alkaline environment, while nitrates rely on an acidic environment to convert to nitric oxide, which is essential for their performance enhancing effects. Now, the limited research available supports this concern, with one study finding no significant environment in cycling performance when sodium bicarbonate and nitrates were used together. And as such, more research is needed to explore the usual. More research is needed. So really, that kind of brings to the end of the whole sodium bicarbonate research session, really. Did it change my opinion on it? Not really. I think for someone who mainly does cycling road races, which are, let's just say, 2 to 3 hours in length, and then criteriums, which are, an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 5 minutes, something like that. it's not on my radar. And as well with the fact that I've got maybe a race calendar with 30 races, and the method at which this year I went about racing was more of a points farming exercise, rather than targeting specific race days. I wouldn't really know when to use it, to be honest. I wouldn't be able to necessarily pick a race to utilize it at. I think maybe if you're a track cyclist with specific goals, yeah, sure. If you're a 5k runner and you've got like 3 key 5k events, then this sounds like a good idea. 1500 meter runner, 800 meter, 400 meter, these kind of things. Definitely. Match sprinter, these kind of things. It looks like beneficial. If you're doing crits, maybe have an experimentation with it. If you're doing road races, it looks to be even less so. And would I use it in my training other than to finalize dosage and methodology and timing, so on and so forth? No. Once I had a clear, 0.28 grams per kilogram, and I'm going to take it, 150 minutes before my start of an event. And then once I had that solidified, that would be it for me using it in training. Unless some adverse effect happened at a race and I'm like, what happened there? Has something changed? And even then, I'd probably do what I've done now. One bad experience and I'd probably call it quits. It just is, to me, it's not worth it. But what's your thoughts? Was sodium bicarbonate supplementation new to you, or is this something you've heard before and you just thought you'd stick around because you just wanted to learn more about it? Is it completely new and you're now thinking, oh, should I take it? Should I not? I suppose what's the worst that can happen, as long as you're staying within these kind of realms of what these kind of studies are doing. But it definitely doesn't look like it's something you do day in, day out, or even 2-3 times a week. It looks like it's a here and there key event, not a training tool. Like caffeine could be, like 3 grams per kilogram could be, is a habitual dosage for a lot of people. So doing it for frequent interval sessions, probably fine, as long as it's not at night and you're affecting your sleep. For more content like this, explore my previous episodes and consider following, rating and sharing the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Share your thoughts and suggest future topics at the vo2lounge@gmail.com or the VO2 Lounge Discord server. Links all down below. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, it's goodbye.